Hello there, Ado from Resource Investment Media. Today I want to discuss the crazy things that mainstream media says. And a few days ago, the New York Times posted an article that the American government should buy commodities when they're cheap and then sell them at a discount to the American population. Essentially saying that the US government should buy the dip. And among financially illiterate information, this one perhaps took the price and in a fairly well manner illustrates why I believe we have entered crazy town in full-scale mode and why the common investor and speculator today has very, very much noise around him and very little signal in terms of the information that he is fed. So to unpack this idea, that at first glance, if you don't really have a good understanding of economics, could sound viable. You would think, well, of course, the government, if they buy cheap gas and then sell it to us at a discount, that's great. I get, my fuel bill goes down and I can live a bit more, I can live a little bit cheaper, which is great for me as an individual. And if only it were so simple, if only it were so easy, that would be a good, viable solution. Now, what's the problem in that? Well, an obvious problem is that when you give a heads up to the market, hey, I'm a whale, I'm a big actor in this market, I have access to my own printing press, and I really need these commodities, so I'm going to be buying the dip. Well, congratulations, you just ran out of dips. There's not going to be any more dips in that market because the mere fact you announced the desire to do so is going to cause other investors to try to front run you. Why on God's green earth would I sell you cheap oil when you essentially just told me that you have a dire need for it and that you're hoping to buy it on the low? Well, obviously I'm not going to try to facilitate your need. I'm going to try to facilitate my desire as an individual who acts after self-reasoning. So when you see these things listed in publications that are as famous as the New York Times, and I should say it's not the first one where I've read policies that are of this sort or that are similar in nature. I've seen in other publications that people said, well, we should buy oil, gas, we should even buy, some people said wheat, corn, fertilizer on the low, and the government should announce a program for doing this. And the mere fact of announcing the program would definitely be counterproductive to the goal that was trying to be achieved. That seemed to escape everyone. So either the people writing for these publications do not know better in terms of financial knowledge, or they're purposely acting with misconduct in terms of intellectual dishonesty, meaning they know that this isn't viable, but they're trying to pander towards a certain segment of the population that they perhaps believe that there's price gouging going on or that the government can solve all these problems. So you don't know which one of the two it is, but it is just awfully interesting to see what we are fed in terms of information, in terms of knowledge, and how much you have to filter as an investor today in order to get financially viable information. So Uncle Sam buying the dip in commodities, even the notion, if anyone associated with the White House would start putting statements like that out, the effect it would have on the commodity market is that you would essentially probably set a floor under it. Now, that would be great for people who are invested in commodity stocks, who are invested in commodities in general. There are ETFs that hold pure commodities such as uranium, silver, etc. It would perhaps be great for these people because the government would definitely be pumping their backs, so to say. But it will probably be extremely bad for the consumer in general, who would all of a sudden see dips within these commodities disappear and price increase perhaps even start to accelerate yet further. So once again, we're seeing that the policies and the discussion of policies is counterproductive in accordance to the goals that want to be achieved. Now, what conclusion can we draw off of that? Well, I would say one conclusion we can draw is more pain needed. And that can sound very harsh or very strange to say, but I guess I would just say that we need both in terms of media, policymakers, and the general public. We need to wake up. we need to definitely snap out of this, almost like we seem to be in an illusion of some sort. And we need to actually go back to fundamental economics and start asking the question, how can we incentivize supply? How can we make permitting so easy that it is ridiculous within these factors? How can we make capital readily accessible so that we can alleviate ourselves from these problems? I unfortunately think that there's a lot more pain needed, because right now, both in the political class and I guess in what would be called mainstream media, there seems to be a complete abandonment of sound fundamental logic, and instead it is almost a competition of who can go further down crazy town, who can make more and more irrational policies and I say suggestion of policies readable towards the public. So that is the first conclusion. I guess the second conclusion, this one's going to be a little bit more harsh to ourselves, is we get the policymakers and the media that we deserve. If you put attention towards a source of information that merely delivers you noise and no signal, well then eventually you deserve the scenario where you only acquire noise and no signal. And if you put your voting capacity towards policymakers that are of equal sort, that merely exaggerate problems instead of alleviating them, well then also you're getting the type of policymakers that you deserve. So the situation has not accidentally occurred. We are in this situation because we have made errors. And you could even argue that we have a solid 20 years of making errors and it's catching up to us. So the change starts with every individual on his own personal or her personal self, deciding what they're going to put effort and time towards, what they're actually going to try to promote in society. And that would be the second conclusion. I guess the third conclusion would be that, considering the lack of suggestion policies when it comes to commodity supply increase, it isn't a stretch to imagine that you could see a strong decade for the commodities industry in this environment, which once again, if you aren't able to change the views of the media outlet or the policymaker, well, at least what you could do is change, I guess, the fortune or the stars of yourself and your family through viewing it from the simple lens of, okay, if there's going to be a high profitability factor within commodities and resources, and policymakers are going to do everything in their power in order to disincentivize new supply, and mainstream media is going to give suggestions that perhaps even make the policymakers seem sound by comparison, well then all I can do is merely try to allocate savings towards this sector. And that seems like a good way to handle it from an individual standpoint, individual basis. I always say every individual, at the end of the day, you're responsible for yourself and for your loved ones. Society at large is much, much harder to view an individual responsibility towards. I would say it's there to a certain extent, but your ability to affect is of far, far less magnitude than when it comes to your own personal circumstances. So a commodities bull run seems, I would say, imminent and almost seems unavoidable from just the world, around the world factors that we are seeing around us. So for the investor and the speculator, I would say that articles like the one that the New York Times posted should definitely make you bullish this sector and this industry. If you like this video, do not hesitate a single second to like and subscribe. Cheers.